If you don't confront PBS and NPR, if you don't confront these universities, if we don't get to the heart of it, this is the heart of it. If we don't deal with that as a society and at least make our education fair and balanced, we're just going to slide right into communism. Welcome back to the Professor Penn podcast. David Penn, your host. Glad to be with you and hoping you're well. Tonight, Tuesday, May 13th, we're going to do episode number 205 together, Fire This Man. So much going on. I want to jump right into the news that matters. So on the far end of tonight's podcast, we can get all of our commentary in. This is the news segment. Since I saw you last, President Trump announced a ceasefire between India and Pakistan, trying to wind down the conflict between two nuclear superpowers. Seems to be holding. Good news. Don't know how many people were killed there in that few days of that conflict, but there was a lot of people killed. And this is not a stable situation, but I will say that the way this war ended quickly indicates to me that it was a show and tell story. President Trump is alleged to have brought about this ceasefire by offering both India and Pakistan trade relations with the United States, access to our consumer market. Both countries are export focused. Both of them have the right price, the kind of things that we all like to find when we saunter around down to Costco or Walmart or Lowe's or Home Depot. You know, that low price. And that access to this market is going to be based on certain concessions, one of which would be, please don't blow the world up with nuclear weapons. I think it's a pretty good deal. Interestingly, that has always been the motif of world trade, of one world government and one world economy, is that it would manage conflict and prevent genocide, prevent Holocaust. So President Trump has pulled that out of the toolkit there, and he's using it. In the meantime, over in the Russian theater, the Ukraine, there was a celebration this past week commemorating the 80th anniversary of the cessation of hostilities, bringing World War II in Europe to an end. It's called VE Europe Day. Let's take a look at number one.
Thousands of Russian troops marched past the Kremlin as Russia marks the 80th anniversary of the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany in the Second World War. The leaders of China and Brazil were among those attending the parade in Red Square. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky described the event as a parade of cynicism. He urged heads of state not to travel to Moscow. Addressing the troops and dignitaries in the last few hours, Vladimir Putin said Russia would always remember and appreciate the Allied contribution to victory in the Second World War, and said the entire country was supporting the so-called special military operation, a reference to Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
The whole country, the society, the people supports those who are taking part in the special military operations. We are proud of their bravery, of the will, of strength of their will that only brought us victories.
Well, President Trump's called for an unconditional 30-day ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. Writing on social media, he said he was committed to securing a lasting peace. Mr. Trump's message comes after he held a phone call with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, who said Kyiv is ready for the ceasefire starting this minute, and that it would be a real indicator of movement towards peace.
That's good, Tanner. Thank you very much. So on that front, that very important line of conflict, East and West, globalists versus Russia, there's calls for a 30-day ceasefire. Allegedly, Thursday, that would be the 15th of May, President Zelensky and President Putin are to meet face-to-face. So there seems to be some kind of movement towards a cessation of hostilities in that conflict, as there has been with India, Pakistan. President Trump is reminding me of a little Dutch boy. He's out there trying to plug all these holes in the dike, seemingly by himself. You know, the pushback in the Republican Party, um, the rhetoric demanding continued conflict versus Russia, that that pressure is actually growing as President Trump is coming closer to drawing this conflict to a ceasefire. That's something that is very interesting. And as a commentary, uh, we know who the people are who are pushing it, who's out in front. But I think, truth be told, there is broad bipartisan support for war, for war. And I ask myself, you know, as a matter of commentary, why? Who are these people that are so committed to this concept of humanity as warlike and needing to have war? And I'm just going to say we're brainwashed. And because we're brainwashed, we elect people that, you know, exploit our proclivity as we the people to believe in these kind of polarities and these kind of conflicts. Uh, I've gone out on a limb here, and I'm going to continue to do this. And for all the people that are watching me that are elected officials, and you know, you want to say that's crazy. It really is not crazy. Uh, what we are is we just have a set of judgments, and I get all these people in the Republican Party, for example, that like to pray before all the meetings. Well, instead of just praying, how about contemplate things like judge not, lest you be judged? We have a bunch of judgments about how humans are supposed to interact with each other, and that, of course, colors the character of the future interactions. So, how do we change that? Well, we change it internally. Each citizen has the power within themselves to release these judgments about human beings that we're warlike and that we're going to have conflict, we're going to kill each other. Just release those judgments because we have an alternative philosophy imploring us to love our neighbors as we wish to be loved ourselves. You know, if you don't try it, we're never going to know if it works or not. And of course, it's never been tried. The United States, as part of this wind down of this war, and it is, I think, potentially winding down. Uh, President Trump has ordered the positioning of more Patriot air defense missile batteries in the Ukraine. In other words, uh, there's a flex going on where the United States is showing Russia that it will take responsibility for defending the Ukraine. It's not a very America first posturing, but I think President Trump's first goal is stop the war. It would be very America first not to have a nuclear war. Good morning, Tanner. Wouldn't you agree?
Good morning. I also think that, like, I don't know, I guess you could say that it's not very American first, but isn't that kinda that's following the deal that we have with the Ukraine of why the discussion of we need to protect them anyways? At first, we are just sending money there,
Well,
so it's a little different.
if you remember, we've just consummated the minerals agreement with them.
Yeah.
So in doing so, we're saying we're going to extract all this wealth from your country. Of course, we're going to have to protect our investment.
Mm.
So that's a very powerful message to Russia. The Russians would also like to do business with the United States. So suddenly, we're having this redefinition of global trade on America First terms. You know, I'm not sure I like this or don't like it. I'm commenting on what I'm seeing. And it's certainly better if we're going to have global economy to have it be in favor of you and me so
Yeah.
that we get something out of it. Uh, Israel, in the meantime, where these Patriot batteries came from, they were taken from Israel. They're being moved to the Ukraine. The Israeli government has approved a plan for the full military occupation of Gaza. This is quite interesting. Uh, the plan involves capturing more territory in Gaza, expanding the so called quote unquote buffer zone where the Israeli Defense Forces have demolished virtually every structure and forcibly displacing Palestinian civilians to move them all to a small area in the south of Gaza. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said Israel is, quote, finally going to occupy the Gaza Strip, and that it was, quote unquote, no longer afraid of the word occupation. Um, Both Smotrich and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have made clear that freeing the hostages is not their priority and that the ultimate goal is what is called ethnic cleansing, which Israel frames as voluntary migration. It's kind of like a strategic redeployment is another word for retreat.
Yeah.
And here we have a voluntary migration. Boy, it sounds very voluntary.
What do you think in real practice, like if someone in Gaza, the Gaza Strip, packed up their bags and just started walking through Israel, do you think that they
Walking
would
towards Israel?
just try, or not towards Israel, but through it just to escape? It does, like, what do you think they're gonna do?
Well, allegedly they have safe passage as long as they move along.
Really? So that is a thing?
They're well, we
I have
played
my doubts on that.
we
That
played
just
on the last episode, we played those scenes, 3 minutes of scenes
yeah.
of Gaza City being destroyed.
Well, right, but I'm saying in real practice, if these people are voluntarily leaving, I just feel like they wouldn't let them go that easily.
Oh, you mean it's a scam? Get them
Yeah,
on the road and then kill them.
yeah.
I think that happens
There's
quite
no
often.
walkway that it's like, "Oh, no, you're good. You just keep walking
Well,
that way."
that does happen. That's been happening in war since war started.
Yeah.
That's got a lot to do why sometimes people don't surrender because you're gonna die anyhow.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
kind of a rather modern thing to take prisoners. Back in the day, nobody took prisoners. And in the modern period of warfare, that's not unusual either.
Hmm.
I mean, I remember a story in World War II. American soldiers were told, allegedly, by senior commanders that if you take German prisoners, feed them out of your own rations. So that kind of cuts down on the prisoner taking, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I wasn't there. I don't know if that's true. That could be lore. But the point is that there is um, a forced migration. It's not voluntary, and that's typically called ethnic cleansing. And we see this tension that's building. And I came out in the last couple of weeks and started talking about the Jewish identity from my perspective. And a friend of mine, Naomi, right away she put a very poignant text on X, not naming me personally. She's cool about it. She just said, you know, what I said was not true. And what I said was my Jewish identity is separate from Zionism. And that is for Jews very difficult to deal with because the identity of being Jewish and being a Zionist has been fused and confused. And so, uh, I went out and did this after working up towards it since 1965. So that was a long wind up before the pitch. And the very week I started, what comes tumbling in the news is that there seems to be quite a rift between President Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Of course, we'll never know. We're not in the room. We're not in the president's head. We're only getting news, which could be spin or propaganda. But certainly, this relationship between Israel and the United States and between these leaders is um, up for grabs, up for reinterpretation. And as I record this, President Trump is in Saudi Arabia today,
Hmm.
meeting with the leaders there, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. And as I said on previous podcasts, part of the market access regards tariffs is about investment in the United States, and President Trump is alleged to be seeking a $1 trillion ante from Saudi Arabia, an investment in we the people. So we're going to see if he pulls that off. But of course, this ongoing voluntary migration, quote unquote, is a problem. And what's so striking about this issue, juxtaposed with President Trump's visit, is as of today, there is no word of President Trump visiting Israel. So he's right down the block, but he's not stopping in. Does that mean anything? I do not know. Uh, since I saw you last, there has been a lessening of trade tensions between China and the United States. When we had the last episode, I said that the Chinese delegation and Scott Bessent, Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent, and his delegation were to meet in Geneva, Switzerland this past weekend. And what emerged out of that was good news. Um, and I watched on X all these talking heads. And it's really interesting to me, and I say this, and those of you who have been watching me, and thank you for being here. There's nothing new about me saying that I do a lot of international trade because here we're in the tire business, tireget.com. That's our e-commerce tire strategy where you can go buy the tires for your family vehicles or for your personal vehicle. If you happen to own a fleet, come on, call me. We do fleet services. It's a great business. I've been in it for a very long time. But because the tire business is internationalized, it's a globalized industry with only 25% of the tires consumed in this country manufactured here. uh, I have a lot of insight into trade because you can't be in the tire business unless you're an importer. And that's, not an indictment anymore of me or anybody else in the tire business or any other industry. Our leadership has sold out our domestic manufacturing going back into guess when? The St. Reagan period. It was Reagan who really accelerated the offshoring of our industry. And when I look at the pundits who comment on trade, they really don't know what they're talking about. And that is because they don't do it. It'd be like me commenting on manufacturing nuclear submarines. I'd have something to say, but actually putting those babies together, what do I know about it? So I would have to be getting the knowledge secondhand. So that's what these pundits are doing. Somebody is explaining it to them, and then they go out and they use their skills of communication to tell a story. When I talk about trade, I'm not telling a story. Well, I am. I'm telling a story, but it's a little bit closer to the search for truth because I actually do it. So when President Trump announced that there was a trade deal with China, there was this giant indictment of the president as if he had caved in, like this whole exercise on tariffs was a failure. When in reality, let's start with the pressing issue first on China. The tariff on Chinese goods has been reduced from 145% to 59%. Let me tell you, the stock market went up big time yesterday. Everybody was so happy to see that. But I'm going to tell you, being in the supply chain, 59% is as much a deal killer as 145%. It just sounds better. Nobody's going to import anything with a 59% tax, or at least they're not going to import anything that's necessary. Now, the margarita ice maker at Costco, that might still come in with the 59% tax. And if you do all the math, that 59% tax probably raises the price, mm, you know, 45%. And then there's other mechanisms to get the price down even farther: currency devaluation, margin suppression, what's called the doctrine of first sale. So it probably could get down to about, 35, 40%. So it's not a deal killer from that perspective. But overall, when you're starting out at 59, anything essential is out of China. Now, electronics are still coming out of China, but they've always been zero tariff. They were never included in this trade war. So all the pundits that are saying President Trump caved, They've never bought anything internationally. And at 59%, you just don't, hey, there's something else to do. So President Trump has not caved. What's really happened since this started is on the majority of product coming in this country, the baseline tax was 2.5%. That's been increased to 10%. So the government of the United States, we the people, is picking up an additional 7.5% on all the imports. And then in the 5 sectors that have broad bipartisan support for onshoring, the real onshoring, there's a 25% tax. In those 5 sectors, which we all need to remember because there's jobs there if you're young: automobile manufacturing, pharma, steel and aluminum, semiconductors, and shipbuilding. Those 5 sectors, they are actually going to be onshored. They will be protected. And on those 5 sectors, the tax has gone up about 22.5%. Tariff revenue in April was the highest in American history, and it actually served to reduce significantly our spending deficit. So there have been great changes here, and all the pundits who call it chaos and he doesn't know what he's doing, like my friend Rob, texts me every day. He's crazy. He's a man-child. No, Rob, I'm sorry. You don't understand what he's doing. Even to get to the point where you could disagree with the president, you'd have to first understand what he's up to. And what he's doing is, number one, he's raising revenue so we, the people, don't go bankrupt. And then people go, oh, he's raising taxes. It's a consumption tax. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Tanner, let me ask you a question. Do you have a credit card?
No.
God bless you.
Yeah,
Let's say,
thank my mom for that.
let's say you had a credit. You have friends who have credit cards.
Yes.
Do they pay their credit card bills?
Pretty good.
Great.
I have one friend that is a big no, but he does cash
Well,
advances.
then he's a bum, right?
Yeah,
Because he's
he's a little
not paying his bills.
love him. But
It's like that scene in Pulp Fiction where Vincent tells Jules, "Then you're a bum." When you borrow money, you got to pay it back. We owe $37 trillion. The income tax will not get it done. We have to establish alternative forms of taxation. Now, there's Plan B. Cut the spending. I mean, do you want to give up your Medicaid, your Medicare, your Social Security, all your government services, and cut the military in half? Hey, proceed. But, life's full of difficult choices. And because our leadership has led us into this bankruptcy scenario under the guise of kicking the can down the road, like the smartest people in the country can't balance a checkbook. That's what they want me to believe. The smartest people in the country, Harvard undergrad, Harvard Law School, economists, PhDs, they can't balance a checkbook, the checkbook of the United States. We're $37 trillion overdrawn in our checkbook. So, of course, we have to pay additional taxes. Otherwise, we're going to go broke. So President Trump is first raising revenue. This is for Rob. He's raising revenue so we don't go broke. That's number one. Number two, he is trying to weaken the geopolitical alliance that is opposed to the United States of America called the Iron Triangle: Russia, Iran, and China. The Iron Triangle because iron will never be broken. Well, he's working on breaking it. He's trying to cut a deal with the Russians on trade. He's trying to cut a deal with the Chinese on trade. But the buried lead is he's telling the Chinese, you can't buy Iranian oil anymore, or we're going to give you secondary sanctions and close your access to the United States market. China, how'd that 145% feel? Wasn't very fun, wasn't it? 40 banks got consolidated, people rioting in the streets. Hey, you know what? That 40 bank thing, that could have been internet lore and legend, but there is certainly, without any question of a doubt, a spate of bankruptcies going on in China and factory closures and job layoffs because without access to the United States, hey, hundreds of billions of dollars output gets snuffed. So President Trump, the buried lead, what's not being talked about is he's told the Chinese, Scott Bessent told the Chinese, you can't buy that cheap Iranian oil. And I told Rob, who's a Zionist, isn't that cool for you? Doesn't that fit your narrative, your Ben Stein, Mark Levin narrative, that President Trump is trying to cut the Iranians' money supply off so that they're neutered and then have to cut a deal? See, that's what President Trump is up to here. And if you can't follow what's going on, the default is it's chaos. Well, it may look like chaos if you didn't do your homework. Actually, they're working a plan that is so well thought through, and the Chinese are going to have to make a decision. If they want access to the United States market, they're going to have to cut off that cheap Iranian oil. Nobody's going to be able to buy oil from Iran. Iran's going to have to make a deal. That's what President Trump is doing. And then the third thing he's working on is onshoring these 5 sectors, bringing back, and there's broad let me tell you how broad the bipartisan support is. Let's just talk about one of these 5 sectors, semiconductors. During the Biden administration, with broad bipartisan support, passed what's called the CHIPS Act. And the CHIPS Act is aimed at onshoring the manufacturing of semiconductors and a massive funding of scientific research to bring in the technocracy. Well, hey, that's what's going on. We're not even talking about the news that really matters. Political news. President Trump. Oh, man, President Trump. See, we haven't seen a force like this since Franklin Roosevelt. President Trump is originally a Democrat. He's become a Republican. And what he's done is he's rendered Democrat and Republican as tribes kind of an inadequate description of our current political zeitgeist. President Trump is advocating for 2 mind-boggling changes in the tax code. Number one, if he could get some traction and get the budget under control, which, remember, he's not the sole driver of this. Remember, Congress has the purse strings. Is Congress ready to cut spending? Well, hey, you might have to go back to your constituents and explain to them that we're broke and that we have to make adjustments in our budget to reflect the reality of being $37 trillion in debt. You know, if you could grow a set of stones and tell the truth, it might help we the people. A little truth telling. But President Trump would like to get that budget close to balanced. He would like to eliminate income taxes on the first $150,000 of personal income. Oh, that'd be a bombshell. And he's also advocating in this big, beautiful bill, which some are now calling the ugly bill, which they're trying to push through Congress to set President Trump's economic agenda in stone. He is advocating for a very large tax increase on high income earners. So let's think about this, Republicans, because I know, and welcome if you're in the party, Representative Emmer, if your people are watching, you're getting clips. I know a lot of people are watching. We're going to talk about that just in a few minutes. I'm very honored that you're watching. I want to thank you for responding. And any of you can come in this studio and have an interview and a conversation that will be erudite and respectful. And if you want to move the needle and advance your opinions, come on in and let's talk about it. Come on in and let's talk about it, because President Trump is not what we would call ideologically scoped along that line of conflict between conservatives and liberals. He's changing the nature of the game. He's changing the dialogue. He's saying, I'd like to cut people free of income tax on the first 150 G's. Wow. Boy, people love. Would you like to be income tax free?
For my first 150?
Right.
Oh, that would be a dream.
Okay, there you go. That's what we're working on here, setting you free of slavery. That's slavery. And the other thing he's talking about is making the uber rich tote the note. And that would be, it'd be the final knockout punch to the leftists because the Elizabeth Warrens and the AOCs and the Bernie Sanders, they've been talking for years about a wealth tax, about the wealthy have to pay their fair share. But it's interesting. It never gets done.
Never gets dude. That's what I was surprised. I was reading this on the script we have. We have all the information, and I didn't know that the highest tax bracket so far doesn't even cross a million. You hit it at 626,350. That's the top tax bracket.
Right. And he's saying no. Scott Bessent has even proposed a special bracket at 5 million and above.
Yeah.
And the point being here is, if President Trump pulls this off over the next 4 years, what's the left got except not believing in God? They won't have anything. If it's the economy, stupid, as has been said since the Clinton era, and people are only concerned about their material well-being, and suddenly President Trump taxes the wealthy and sets everybody else free of income taxes, oh, that would be the knockout punch of the Democrat Party, because he's willing to do what these people have only talked about. But of course, Democrats and Republicans alike are resisting this idea.
Yeah.
What a surprise.
That's exactly what Stephen A. Smith said the other day, though, in a clip that Royce had on his podcast, Please Call Me Crazy. Stephen A. Smith was saying that a lot of people that are moderate are being pushed to the Republican because they're watching the Democrats and seeing all the promises they never deliver on. And now they're watching Trump just one after another, just doing it.
Man, I sent out the News That Matters, my newsletter, which one day we're going to put up. The Professor Penn website's ready to go, waiting on me, so we can all get organized, better organized. Because remember, we're doing a political podcast here. So I want to just break into this just for a minute as it pops into my mind. Tanner, can you put up Caucus Counterattack? This is from the Royce White for Senate website. That's roycewhite.us. Take a look at that. You see that says Caucus Counterattack. And Royce says, quote, please become a Min GOP delegate for Royce White. Help me get the 2026 Min GOP endorsement for Senate. It's easy to do. Sign up here and we will contact you about how. Thank you. So you go to the roycewhite.us website if you're a Minnesotan. Now, you can come there if you're not a Minnesotan, and we'd appreciate the support. We'd appreciate you buying your tires at TireGet. We'd wish you to go to the Free People store and support the content. As always, thank you, Kathy, for all your support and all the other people who are giving monthly subscriptions and sending in donations and buying tires. Thank you, because we're making a move here. This thing is growing. It's cool. But you can go here, and I'm going to get in touch with you if you're in Minnesota, because we're a political action community. The point of this is to move everybody in this community from watching to doing. And to become a delegate in Minnesota, you become the most important person in America. You decide who the party endorses for office. And if we're going to get rid of these awful RINOs, which are gumming up President Trump's agenda, we're going to have to get off the couch and get in the game. Becoming a delegate. Oh my gosh, it's 6 hours a year. 6 hours a year of your time to change the future of America. President Trump, since I saw you last, issued an executive order terminating federal funding for National Public Radio and the public broadcasting system. Wow. For those of us, I went out, there's all this thing about what is a Republican. There was a guy named Tom Weiler. In 2022, he ran for Congress here in CD3, Tom Weiler. And I met with him. And he was a former naval officer, a submariner, had a lot of courage, in my opinion, because he had, a very, very noticeable nerve disease. I think it was Parkinson's. He shook. And I thought it was so brave of him to stand before his fellow citizens and offer his service when he was compromised, and I thought that was uh, very appropriate, very brave. But then, just because he's got a disease, what does he believe? And I asked him, uh, Tom, what do you watch for news? And he says, uh, National Public Radio. And I thought to myself, wow, we're running a leftist here in the Republican Party. Because I said, do you watch anything? He says, nope, NPR and Minnesota Public Radio. That's my news source. Well, I mean, hey, if that's your only news source, you're getting a very um, politicized and propagandized narrative about what's going on in the world. And President Trump said, hey, we're not going to fund it. We, the people, are not going to fund a leftist propaganda platform. So, of course, there's all this outcry about it. But have you ever watched PBS or NPR, Tanner?
NPR, I will be sad about the Tiny Desk concerts. They did really good Tiny Desk concerts. But that's about it. That's all I ever really watched for NPR.
Tiny Desk is badass.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
I think we played some on the podcast, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I watch it. I actually have a brother-in-law that worked for NPR for decades. Give you a little history on that. My family, my sister, these people are leftists. They're communists. And I don't wish them any harm, but I don't want to pay for it. I mean, hey, if the government would like to fund Free People Radio, I'm all for it. There's an old saying. I talked sometime about one of my mentors, and he had a saying. He's dead now. I remember the first time I heard him say this, my head blew off my shoulders. He said to me, Mr. Penn, I'm all for corruption as long as I am part of it. And I said, Joe, he said, think about it. I said, I don't want to. But I mean, really, this whole group, NPR and PBS, has been getting all this money to advance this narrative, which is really an anti-Trump, anti-America First narrative. There's no money for broadcasts like Free People Radio, except the support you give us, and thank you so much. And when you do see USAID wading into media, which they gave untold billions to media over the years, that's to pervert and twist the narrative in the way that the security state wants it to come out.
And also just, let's just have the benefit of the doubt for a second that there isn't a direct order for NPR or PBS to be pushing leftist agenda. It happens naturally because the tax money is a part of their income. So why would they ever speak badly about somebody that's paying them? It's just a conflict of interest. There should be no news station that ever has any payments from the government because that's always going to make a conflict of interest.
That's a very good point.
That's the way I don't know. Because personally, I hear you when you say NPR is pretty leftist, but every time I watched it, I guess I never really got that. But it's a huge newscast. So there's different sectors, the Tiny
That's
Desk
what
concert.
you watch.
Right.
It's not easy to politicize
Tiny
music.
Desk concerts.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, but if you look at the artists and the music,
oh yeah,
it is leftist.
The things that
poetry.
they push.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, that doesn't make the music not beautiful or not worth listening to. And I'm not opposed to art that is politically driven from the right or the left. What I'm looking at is the art, the movement, the sound, the visual. But if there's just an unending cascade of leftism and there's nothing else to countervail against it, then you have not education, not art. You have propaganda, which is a perfect segue into number 2.
So the Trump administration froze more than $2 billion in grants for Harvard University after the school refused to comply with the White House's requirements. The Trump administration demanded the university eliminate its DEI programs and screen international students for ideological concerns. Yesterday, Harvard pushed back, calling the request illegal. In a statement, the university's president wrote, quote, no government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. Harvard is now the first school to flatly reject the White House's demands, though other universities are pushing back. Last week, the White House announced it will halt federal funding for Cornell and Northwestern while the administration investigates alleged civil rights violations. Meanwhile, Columbia University had its funding restored last month after it agreed to a series of changes set by the White House. Chris Matthews, your thoughts on Harvard's decision not to cave?
Well, I have to say that the administration sometimes sets its targets in the right direction. The elite universities of this country are not exactly covered in roses right now in the way that they handle these demonstrations. I think everybody, whether you're a Jewish student or not, I think you want to have a right to go to a class when you're paying $90,000 a year in tuition. You have a right to go to the class and be taught by your professors and to enjoy the rights of a better university, a good university. And the fact that they had to be told to do this, they had to be told to let students go to school, which is what this is about, that they had to be told to do that, they had a problem in their own heads. So I think the elite universities are taking a beating right now. It's probably a smart move. It may not be nice, but it's one of those areas where people are rooting for this guy Garcia because they think he might be an innocent man being thrown into a prison in a foreign country. But the fact is, in this case, it's Trump going after the elites. He knows what he's doing. Politically, it's not going to hurt him. I think these universities have enough money to cover their legacies. They got a lot of money to handle it, so they're going to be able to take care of themselves. I don't want to be loose about this, but I think Trump targeting these universities is probably not the worst move he ever made.
I'm going to respectfully push back on this. I totally disagree. This is thought policing 101. This is not okay. The truth is, and I say this as a Jew, this is not. They are using anti-Semitism as a cloak. Right. If this administration really cared about anti-Semitism, there's a lot of stuff they could do. This is not about that. This is about targeting universities. This is about targeting speech. This is right out of an authoritarian playbook. And this is, and, you know, they may say that it's one thing, but what I've been really impressed with is that we're seeing a lot of universities push back because they know this is illegal. So we have, right after Harvard did it, we saw MIT go right after that. We had already seen the president of Wesleyan, Michael Roth, do a really great job of pushing back. He was joined by the president of Amherst. There are huge numbers of academics and academic institutions that are going to push back on this because this is absolute government overreach at the highest order. It has nothing to do with anti-Semitism and everything to do with authoritarianism.
Former President Obama praised Harvard for their, all right, different points of view here. This is what we do. But here's what the former president said about Harvard's decision. Chris, you want to take the final word?
I just want to say something that happened in Harrisburg the other night. And I think that guy breaking in and starting a fire to kill the family of the governor of Pennsylvania was a serious act. It looked like anti-Semitism. It happened over a Seder weekend. I think there's a real challenge. I asked my friends who are Jewish, I said, are you worried? And they say yes. This is a problem. And the treatment of those students at Columbia is a serious problem. You don't stop a kid from going to school their parents paid for. It's serious. And it was judged, it was against those students and said, you can't go to class even to take an exam. Well, seriously, if you don't think that's a problem, you got a problem yourself.
I'm a Jew. I absolutely believe that anti-Semitism is a real and serious problem. But I also think that taking over Harvard University's teaching and academia and ideology is not the answer.
Fair enough. We'll leave it there and come back to this.
Boy, that was a target-rich clip. As a Jew was her byline there. That was the used to be famous Chris Matthews shocking that leftist panel and saying that he thought it was reasonable to go after these institutions, that it was politically reasonable for President Trump to do this. And this woman, Molly Jong Fast, said that as a Jew, she thought it was not appropriate, that it was authoritarianism, that it really wasn't an attempt to protect and to combat anti-Semitism. Well, you know, this is this is tough, okay? Because actually, I agree with her at one level. At another level, I have to say that the entire academic edifice of these East Coast schools where I was educated, and even back when I went to school in the 70s, this was already apparent to me, which is why I did not become and follow in my professor father's footsteps, because these people are communists. And what they've done over the decades, and this is coming out of the um, uh, anti-colonial, uh, the redaction of colonialism, the research into colonialism, the effects of colonialism, who were the colonialists, what happened to the colonized. That's was the sum total of everything I learned when I went to one of these schools back in the 70s, has now evolved into an ideology that says that Israel is a white settler colonialist enterprise exploiting the native brown peoples of the region. And that's, rooted in 50 years of academic work in every social science discipline. So at one level, I agree with Molly Jong Fast. President Trump is using anti-Semitism as a predicate to make these moves. But at a deeper level, the entire output of these uh, so-called humanities or liberal arts educational programs, the entire academic uh, inquiry has led to this um, characterization of Israel as a white settler colonial enterprise. So there's truth in everybody's position here, depending on what street corner you want to stand on. But what's interesting is Molly Jong Fast is saying that anti-Semitism is a problem, as if it doesn't come from this intellectual inquiry, which in fact it does to some extent, and she is willing to overlook the anti Semitism in this inquiry to maintain the edifice of the communist, Marxist, liberal, progressive, leftist education that our children get when they go off to school. We'll talk about that a little bit more in just a couple of minutes. And then what ends up happening is, if you don't confront PBS and NPR, if you don't confront these universities, if we don't get to the heart of it, this is the heart of it. This is the beating heart of leftism, the universities. If we don't deal with that as a society and at least make our education fair and balanced, uh, you know, we're just going to slide right into communism, because we're turning out generation after generation of students who are acculturated into the European intellectual tradition of Darwinism and Marxism. That's what it is. And I know people are going to say that's not what it is. Well, I went there, I know the people, and you're lying to yourself, you're lying to the people that are listening. So we have to confront this. It just is what it is. And I have said to Representative Marion Rarick here in our own Minnesota state legislature, who was brave enough to say that some 2,100 employees of the University of Minnesota make more money than the governor of the state of Minnesota. And I said, great, Marion, that's courageous. And for all you legislators that are watching this, could you pick up the gaunt? Could you just pick it up? Let's get on this thing, just like President Trump is doing it at the national level. Could you all get after the University of Minnesota and show some courage? Show some courage. We're going to talk about this momentarily. Momentarily. President Trump has banned federal funding for dangerous gain of function research. We're going to go by that quickly. It bears a lot of consideration. Why did we ever do gain of function research? Who was involved? What were the implications? Were there any accidents? These are all things that inquiring minds want to know. Gain of function is when you take a virus and you enhance its lethality. The cover story being it's so you can come up with a vaccine in case that virus mutates. We have to be ready at all times. Of course, it's dual use, because when you enhance its lethality, that virus now becomes a more effective bioweapon. You know, not everything that comes out of science is good. That judgment's got to move, particularly for the boomer-aged people. Anything that's scientific is good. Every scientific invention is good. No, it's not. It's not. Nuclear weapons are not good. They're not good. There's a lot of things that science generates that is not good for the well-being of the people. Boy, I'm going to just slide on by a bunch of news here. Might have to go to the 4-hour format someday.
Oh boy.
uh, President Trump has signed the first trade agreement with the United Kingdom, proving that there are opportunities for every country in the world to show up and cut a deal, as he said he was going to do. I thought it was quite symbolic that the first deal was made with Great Britain, because it's been my contention that Great Britain has been manipulating the United States since 1812, progressively. And I would say President Trump has subordinated Great Britain. That's just my street corner of analysis. He's defanging them. They can't do very much without American might and American industrial productivity, without American weaponry, without the American military. And he's just telling them, this is the way it's going to be. So I think that's great. Let's put them on the payroll and tell them what to do instead of vice versa.
I am Beth Beneke. I am a 10-year Army veteran, active duty, served in Bosnia, Iraq, Kuwait, Kosovo. I had my son Christian 8 years ago, and I had an idea for a baby product. And I made a prototype for myself and one for my friend. And she said, oh my gosh, this thing is so useful.
Can you
should
pause
make
it
it
just
real.
for a second? See, this is the kind of stuff I'd like to bring to an end. I'm a veteran. I served. I'm a mother. I have kids. You know, these are personal choices. This woman is being paraded around by Amy Klobuchar as an example of what President Trump is doing to the economy. So she's credentializing herself. Oh, she's a veteran and she's a mother. Let's be very sympathetic to her. This has nothing to do with what she's about to talk about, which is the effect of President Trump's China policy on her business. Let's continue.
And I currently have 3 months worth of inventory sitting at my factory that I cannot bring to the US. I have maybe 2 months worth left in my warehouse in Minnesota. And when that's gone, I have no more revenue. I cannot pay my employees. I cannot pay my bills. I cannot pay the loans, which I have leveraged my house against. So we could lose our house. I do not have the $230,000 that were just immediately dropped in front of me to get my products into the US. So I am asking, begging for support from both parties to support our small businesses and get rid of these tariffs on US-owned small businesses.
All right, let's get down to some truth-telling here. She's an entrepreneur, and I respect that because I'm an entrepreneur. And she's saying that she's a loser because of these Trump tariff policies vis-a-vis China. She sources in China. Well, first of all, I went to her website and I looked at it. People aren't going to like me saying this, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be the bringer of truth or the search for truth, but if you think about the economy like a pitcher of beer or a mug of beer, there's beer and there's foam, right? You get a bunch of foam on the top of the beer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's not so fun to drink. You're really there for the beer, not the foam, right?
Yeah.
That's how our economy is. There's beer in our economy, things that you have to have, like tires. You must have tires. You have to have food. You have to have shelter. There's things we have to have. We must have them. And then there's a bunch of foam, things we'd like to have, things that make life a lot more interesting if you want to look at it that way from a material perspective. Now, this woman um, owns a company called Busy Baby. I went to her website. I looked at all of her products. All of her products are made in China. And I raised 5 babies. None of those products were available when I raised my kids. I mean, it just didn't exist. None of it existed. And I raised my kids, and we were just fine without those products. So this is the foam part of the economy. This woman, and with all respect to her, she's talking about being a loser in this trade policy, and the tax was just lowered from 145% to 59%. Will she bring in her products at 59%? Will it work? Not very well. It will not work very well. And it will not work very well because the price is going to go up quite a bit, and it's not necessary. It's not necessary. Her products are not essential. So let me tell you what's going on in China. They're still making electronic products in China, and these electronics have always been exempted from these tariff regimes. Everything else, and then rare earth minerals, which have to be imported from China, which that was a deal set up by the globalists. They gave that concession to the Chinese. The environmentalists are going to be very unhappy. President Trump has signed an executive orders. We have rare earth minerals here in the United States. We're just going to have to tear some mountaintops off to get to them. They're not that rare. So the two things that come out of China that are still essential, electronics and rare earths, there's a workaround there. Everything else that's coming out of China at this point, and I can tell you, I was in China in 1993. It may be, and I'm sorry to you, the entrepreneur, it may be essential to your business and to your livelihood, but it's not essential to the general economy. It's a choice. It's not a must-have. So uh, they've paraded this woman out there. She's attractive. She's a veteran. Thank you for your service. She's a mother. Thank you for your service. I want you to think about the millions of people who lost their jobs in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010, the millions and millions and millions of people who lost their livelihoods when the banking system made the decision to offshore industry to China. Did any of those people get to show up with Amy Klobuchar and complain about, I lost my job? They closed the mine. They closed the factory. My plastic extrusion business went bankrupt. No. The economy is dynamic and capitalism is destructive. There is constantly a rebirth of what works and what doesn't work. That's the nature of the game. Don't expect the government to guarantee your business survival. The only person that can guarantee the survival of Tireget is your host. So I implore you to go buy tires there. But, if we go out of business, which we could because of government policy, hey, there's no tears about that. When you take that risk to become an entrepreneur, hey, you're looking for the reward of self-governance. The price might be, the end. And there is no insurance to protect you from that.
I also I don't know, kind of a thought, but just a question too. Can you call yourself a small American business if all your products are coming from China?
Yeah, she's an American business owner.
But calling it a small maybe I just have always thought small American means that like all their goods are from here. They're small, they're local, they're not shipping things off to the UK or up to Canada. I imagine I don't know. Is
Well,
she really a small American business if
yes,
she
she is. She's an American businesswoman, and I don't like the word small because and she talked about she could lose her house. That's a distortion. Here in Minnesota, there's something called the homestead exemption. If you go broke here in Minnesota, even if you've pledged your home as collateral for the loan, as she indicated she had, I don't remember the exact number, but I think it's like $500,000 or $450,000 of your home's equity is protected. The government and the banks cannot take it away from you. Now, if she's living in a home that's worth $2 million, hey, she's going to have to sell it, but she's still going to get $450,000 cash out of the deal if she's got that equity. Would you like to have 450? Tanner, could you buy a nice place for your family for 450
No.
cash?
No, I would have to move. I was just looking at house prices last night. Yeah, no.
Can't make it at 450?
No, you maybe would get a 3-bedroom, 1-bath.
You couldn't live in a house that's worth 450?
I mean, I personally could, but
Yeah.
she sounds like she's got a whole established
I'm talking
family.
about you.
Oh, me
If you had
personally, yeah, I'd be fine.
$450,000 in a pile of hundreds,
Yeah.
could you go find a place to live and pay cash for that place?
Yes, I can
So
say
can
yes.
she. She has the homestead exemption. That is a cognitive distortion. So there was 3 cognitive distortions there. I'm in the military. I'm an ex-military member. Irrelevant. I'm a mother. Irrelevant. I'm going to lose my house. Irrelevant. Not true. What's true is she's sourcing in China. I stopped sourcing in China in 2016. That's 9 years ago. Why? I saw the handwriting on the wall. If you're still in China in 2025, you took a risk and you're getting a result. Very simple.
I want to raise an issue that I think has been lurking out there for 2 or 3 weeks and cast it specifically in national security terms. You already are the oldest president in history, and some of your staff say you were tired after your most recent encounter with Mr. Mondale. I recall yet that President Kennedy had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances?
Not at all, Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
Look at Mondale laugh. That's good, Tanner. Thank you very much. That is the classic debate between President Reagan and Walter Mondale. And that is one of the most noteworthy debate takedowns in debate history. And it was funny. I mean, it was really hilarious. And even Mondale had a laugh. And, you know, when you're in the ring actually fighting someone, getting knocked out or knocking somebody else out is the point of the event. But if that's the point of the event in a debate, it's just that in a debate, it's hard to get that clean shot, that right cross or that left hook. It just doesn't come up that often. But it happened just a couple of nights ago here in Minnesota as Free People Radio and Royce White and David Penn emerge as fearless defenders of freedom, fighting back against the tyrannical apparatchiks that work for or support a kind of republicanism that is soft and in collaboration with the communists. And I play that clip because, man, Royce White got a headshot in, a debate headshot in on this Michael Broadcorp. And Michael, I know you're watching, and I have to tell you right now, dude, I'm not responding to you anymore because I realize talking to you, I can't respond to you. It's just anybody who's been in a fight knows. If you beat somebody that can't defend themselves, it doesn't feel good. And dealing with you has got to the point where you're just so pathetic. I got to let you go. Say anything you want, post anything you want. You know, you're a spent shell, brother. You should withdraw, you know. But hey, venture on. You got to make a living. And like the Godfather said, whatever a man does for a living is really none of my business. So you keep on the payroll somewhere. But Royce, man, he put you down so hard that I laughed for minutes afterwards. Broadcorp posted up, and Tanner put this up there. Royce, I say this without judgment. You're clearly going through something, and chasing attention won't bring you the peace you need. A licensed professional could help guide you to something more real and lasting. And Royce comes back and says, white dudes for Harris. I mean, man, talk about getting attention to yourself when you're the former deputy chair of the Republican Party of Minnesota and you endorse Harris Waltz instead of Donald Trump. Man, you've aggregated some attention to yourself. We had quite a dust up the last few days around here. Royce was really quite active on social media, and he was advancing the idea that Republicans in Minnesota are soft because we got these Republicans in Minnesota saying, Royce, you swear, how you talk is unbecoming of a candidate for the U.S. Senate. And I will respond to this by saying that I've had a lifetime of white starched shirt, red, white, and blue tie, blue suit, American flag lapel pin wearing, Harvard undergraduate, Harvard Law School, military service, married to the high school sweetheart, 3 children. And what they gave me was an endless war and $37 trillion of debt. So, what is really an abomination? Using a swear word or consigning the people to a life of debt, slavery, drug addiction, and piracy, endless war. And I'm going to tell you what the abomination is. It's what these coiffed professionals have given me. And so for the Republicans that are listening, I understand you don't like swearing. I get it. Swearing is about class. It's not really about religion. Now, I know there is some text about, don't use foul words, but it's not in the top 10 when it says, thou shalt not use the Lord's name in vain. And they're not talking about swear words. They're talking about what the Republican Party does constantly. Wrap its unholy ambitions in the cloth of faith, as happens before almost every meeting. That is blasphemous. But a swear word is a signatory of class. Royce does not come from the Breck Blake High School, go to the Ivy League cohort. He didn't come from money. He didn't grow up with the silver spoon in his mouth. He comes from where I come from. I grew up on the poor part of St. Paul. I grew up in the poor part of St. Paul. My parents raised me in a house they paid $6,000 for. I didn't know it was, downrange at the time. And I didn't care, and I still don't care. And I like to swear, and I swear all the time. I said, I said someplace recently, I have a closet full of $1,000 suits. I dress like this because Republicanism is no longer an elite party of silk stocking country clubbers who don't care about anything except for their own pocketbook. That Republicanism is dying. And watching you try to defend it, is watching you try to defend away. The people are poor. I mean, we've impoverished America. When President Trump says, let's make America wealthy again, he's saying we're poor. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to be wealthy. You're going to say, oh, I've got my 401k. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. 10% of the people in this country own 88% of the equities. What about the other 90% of the people? Tanner, do you own any stocks, bonds?
Nope.
Treasury notes?
Mm-mm.
Treasury bonds?
Only thing I own is my car.
Great. Is it paid for?
Yep.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm making payments on mine. We're not rich anymore. And then there's this dude, as long as I'm settling some scores here tonight, there's this dude that runs the Minneapolis Republicans in CD5. His name is Sean Holster. I've been out to breakfast with him. I never had a mean word with him. I was never in conflict with him. And then in the middle of 2024, can you put up this Sean Holster X post, please? Sean puts up, as this is my personal ex, not affiliated with the party. Well, Sean, you're the leader of the band, so how could it be that your personal ex post is not associated with the party? I think that's legally a little questionable. Sean feels he quote, I feel it is my moral obligation to warn every Republican and conservative away from Royce White. His campaign is using him. David Penn and his cadre of the disenfranchised are playing you for fools and personal gain. All right, let's talk about that sentence. Anybody who's worked with me politically knows I don't use people. When I talk down to people, I feel awful about it. And I said last night on an X Space, there's some bluster and bravado in my presentation because I'm trying to inspire courage in other people. But I'm very humble in the spirit. And to say that I'm doing this for personal gain is really ridiculous. When I read something like that, knowing what I'm going through financially in my life, I wonder what these people who say this are doing for personal gain in politics. Because there's no personal gain in here for me. I'm going to come on this show and tell you when we're breaking even, because we're a long way from breaking even. So please go to Target. Please go to the Free People's Store. Please make donations. I'll tell you when we're breaking even. We're not. So this assertion that Royce is a grifter and I'm doing this for personal gain and then I'm playing you for a fool, the people in this audience, and I'm not talking about those that are watching for material to attack me. I'm talking about the people, the many, many people who have told me that they've watched every episode. I don't think you feel I'm playing you as a fool. And if I have insulted anybody here by accident, I apologize. The only people I really want to insult is the liars. If you disagree with me and do it honestly, I respect you. It's just the liars, like this thing, alleging Sean Holster that I'm doing this for personal gain and that first of all, I'm not disenfranchised. I'm actually part of the economic system of this country. I'm franchised. I'm not disenfranchised. I'm trying to change the system from within using the constitutional process. We're not done with this. Put that back up there, please.
Mhm.
And I'm not playing anybody for a fool. But this last sentence, I want to let everybody know how much I bridle against this. Royce himself is not a bad person. When you read a line like that, that's a setup. And here's the pitch. I wish him and his supporters well. You are decent people who have been schnooked by a very bad, vindictive human. I never had a single negative interaction with Sean Holster. I don't know why he says I'm vindictive, because I was never vindictive to him. And if I was vindictive to him, he would know it. He's just manipulating his audience, talking like this. But the word I want to focus on is schnooked. Schnooked. Now, being born a Jew, I would say that is the single most anti-Semitic slur aimed at me publicly in my career. This man is an officer of our Republican Party. We're talking about anti-Semitism. We got Mary Amlow running around with Israeli flags. Tom Emmer, Israeli flags. Tom Emmer, the recipient of incredible amounts of money from AIPAC. And yet, when I went to David Hand and I said, and other Jewish people went, because when they saw that this is just obviously, to a Jewish person, anti-Semitic, went to him and said, hey, wait a second. Why do we have an anti-Semitic comment? Is this person in the party actually anti-Semitic? Because generally speaking, to speak in an anti-Semitic fashion, you're anti-Semitic. Why would an anti-Jewish person be the leader in our Republican Party? And you know what? if you're in KSTP or you're, in the news and you're paying attention now to free people, which I know you are, why don't you investigate this? Because this is truly disgusting. We're living in an era where Jewish people are threatened physically by anti-Semitic sentiment. And here's a party officer acting in this fashion. Boy, unbelievable. So I was in a relaxed mode this past Saturday. And from time to time, all the time, Michael Broadcorp, who, I'm going to try not to respond to because uh, I feel these people I can't respond to them because I don't feel any sense of dignity or challenge. And for all of you that have been afraid of our elected officials and their paid media minions, and they are paid influencers, man, when you actually get in the game with these people and compete with them, they're not very good at what they do. And I want to talk to, Representative Tom Emmer, who employs a guy named Bobby Benson, who on a recent podcast, I asked Bobby Benson to resign. And that must have got back to him, or he must be watching. Good evening, Bobby. Why do I ask you to resign? Because the Republican Party of Minnesota is volunteer citizen participation in self-governance. And when we get paid political operatives in the party, they wield a disproportionate level of influence over party matters. I don't think that's fair. So, rather than us work so hard to get rid of you, could you just do something with some sacred honor and resign? Well, you must not have liked that. So, Representative Emmer, let me tell you what this guy did. I was sitting at home Saturday, and I started going back and forth with Brian Strouser, which I seldom do because he's another dude that I really don't want to interact with because, it's actually he's better. I mean, there's something going on there, but it's still just not right for me. I don't feel good. I remember every time I've been in a fight and every time I've hurt somebody, and the times that I've been in a fight and hurt people that couldn't defend themselves well, I didn't feel good about myself. And that's how I feel about you people. You guys suck at what you do. And Representative Emmer, I want to tell you, there has been this allegation, this feeling, this unsupported feeling in the party amongst the party stalwarts, the delegates, that Bobby Benson was involved in the hiring of Michael Broadcorp after the last convention, and that since Bobby Benson works for you, Representative Emmer, that you were organizing Bobby Benson and Anna Matthews and David Hand to hire Michael Broadcorp in this hidden Wyoming corporation, and then Broadcorp went out and trashed Steve Boyd and trashed Royce White with scurrilous allegations, and Dustin Gragey participated in it in this Prey of Sam Sunder. All these people are doing this for money. I'm not doing it for money. I'm losing money doing this. I'm not doing this to get rich. I own a business. I'm doing this to try to change politics in Minnesota by encouraging you to get involved in the political process. And these people are threatened by that idea. They're able to ply their trade because of the passivity and the softness of Minnesota Republicans. When we grow a spine, these con artists are going to run away. So, Representative Emmer, let me tell you what this Benson did. I'm going back and forth with Strouser, and then Broadcorp comes in, and they're ridiculing me because of the stage name Professor Penn, as if this is going to somehow put me down. And I said to Broadcorp, hey, Broadcorp, you know what? If I'm so stupid and so this, that, does, I don't think he called me stupid, but no, he said I ply the trade of misinformation, disinformation, and that I lie. Okay, what am I lying about? From Michael's perspective, that Michael Broadcorp was on the payroll and paid to trash endorsed Republican candidate Royce White, and then he goes out and trashes endorsed Republican candidate Donald Trump by endorsing Harris Waltz. So, I look at this and I'm going back and forth with these people, Strouser and Broadcorp, and I'm all by myself doing this. And I'm thinking, it's kind of a waste of time. And then guess what happens, Representative Emmer? Bobby Benson shows up. to ridicule me. Bobby Benson, who we have no 8x10 glossies that he's coordinated with Strasser and Broadcorp. We don't know that. We don't know. But suddenly on a Saturday, a lazy Saturday, a beautiful Saturday, all three of them are working me simultaneously. Representative Emmer, what kind of a bonehead would blow ballast and come up to the surface like this and make me think that he's on your payroll and that you're orchestrating this? No, I don't have any 8x10 glossies still to this day, but look what the guy did. Man, I'd fire him. I wouldn't let this guy reveal you like this, because even if it's not true, in my mind, I can see that Broadcorp, Strausser, and Benson follow each other and coordinate. Why? Because they all coordinated on me, like three-man fighting, which I've done and which it felt like. So, Representative Emmer, I want to invite you to come on here. I respect you. I don't like the lying. I respect you're a phenomenal politician, a great salesman, a leader of this country. I believe, and I see all these tweets from you, Donald Trump's this, that, you're a constant MAGA supporter, even though you were a never Trumper. Like Norm Coleman, a constant MAGA supporter, but a never Trumper. Well, what's Norm Coleman going to do now that Donald Trump seems to be breaching with Netanyahu? I don't know. Maybe sentiment will change. But, Representative Emmer, I believe in redemption. I believe in restoration. I believe in reunion. I believe in republicanism. Every time you post, it's pro-Donald Trump. Man, it's so pro-Donald Trump that people are going to forget that you're for the national popular vote. People are going to forget that 2022 debt ceiling debacle that you pitched, the greatest cuts to government spending in American history. People are going to forget that you were a never Trumper. But, maybe you've changed. Maybe like I've changed. Maybe like so many American citizens are changing and becoming America First, believing in the America First agenda. And if that's the case, man, I would be so happy to unify around the truth of that, which you could just come on and talk about it, and that'd be cool. But instead, what I got was Bobby Benson, Brian Strausser, and Michael Broadcorp all in the same string, all at the same time, ridiculing me, which lets me know from my street corner, I don't have any 8x10 glossies, but my feelings tell me that they're coordinated. Man, rookie. And as long as we're talking about the Coleman clan, could you please play number 10?
Hello, everyone. I wanted to hop on to say Happy Teacher Appreciation Week. Thank you so much to all the teachers out there for everything you're doing, shaping the bright young minds of the next generation. It is my sincere hope that we can get our act together here when it comes to balancing our budget so we can do things like help you with teacher pension reform, help you with smaller class sizes, help you get easier pathways to the classroom, and help you have safer schools. I hope that we can get the work done so we can show you truly how much we appreciate all that you do.
Well, Julia Coleman, the daughter-in-law of former Minnesota Senator Norm Coleman, who is the head goomba of the RJC, the Republican Jewish Committee, who recently said, when we played, that Jews are the masters of the universe. This is Julia Coleman, ambitious. And there she is, reaching out to the public school teachers union and teachers in her district. I had the same thing with Pam Altendorf when she came on the program. She's a Minnesota State legislator, and I made some comment about teachers, and boy, she covered up and crouched down on that right away. I'm not running for office and I'm not elected to office. And Julia Coleman one time said, "Tell me you've never been elected." You know what? That's not going to work. The problem with Minnesota the railhead is the University of Minnesota. We have generated generation after generation of leftists out of that institution. And I know it because I grew up in that world. I'm not just making it up. I mean, I've said this. I was in the room in 1969 when a handful of academics made a plan about how to turn Minnesota into a communist state, and they succeeded. So I was not there as a participant. I was just hanging out there as a kid. But whatever, I remember like it was yesterday. And here's Julia Coleman. She's always wearing that business suit and that tie. Costuming is very important. Very important. How do we determine a culture? Costumes, rituals, key figures, the creation myth of the culture, rules, norms, traditions, history. That's how we know who someone is, what they believe. Like someone pointed out to me that Julia Coleman had been referring to illegal aliens as undocumented immigrants. That's kind of a tell, using that word undocumented immigrants in a post. Julia Coleman, she's aligning herself with the left. They're undocumented immigrants. They're not illegal aliens. They're not criminals who broke our law to get here. No, they're undocumented immigrants. Like my family is a family of immigrants. Your family's a family of immigrants. Oh, we're just not documenting these people. No, these people are here. They're chaos agents brought here to change this country. And this is why Royce White swears, because these people are pandering to the very ideology that seeks to remove my freedom to worship, my freedom to pursue my life and my liberty and my happiness. And this is the kind of soft politics that has come to typify Minnesota. Julia Coleman is pandering to a union and union members. 74.3% of public school teachers are female, 25% are male. Okay, this is a very leftist cohort of people. They are educated in our elite institutions. They are passing that elite educational output onto their students. It is not neutral. It is steeped in leftism. And we need representatives, senators, and legislators like Julia Coleman to stand up and start to change this. Not leave President Trump out there all by himself. Where's the effort here in Minnesota? Oh, they're very quick. Julia Coleman's at the front end of talking about fraud. Oh, that's great. Fraud, materialism, easy, fraud. Everybody likes to get in on that one. And by the way, where's the outcome? Where's the beef? Lots of talk. Where's the beef? But when it comes to the spiritual issue, what our children are learning, oh, the teachers, they're so great. No, they're not great. They're not. Not all of them. Some of them are great. Of course, in everything, there's the great, the not so great, and then the awful. You went to, Tanner, when you went to school, did you have some good teachers?
Yeah.
Did you have some bad teachers?
Oh, yeah.
Were there more good teachers or more bad teachers?
There's more bad teachers.
Why? Why? You know what? That's because the union protects bad teachers. And one bad teacher can undo and overcome the influence of a good teacher. Why? Because it's so easy to tear down a young person's self-image. It's so easy to brainwash someone that doesn't have a filter. So as much as that good teacher worked to help you, what did those bad teachers do to hurt you? Do you got any good stories of any bad teachers that hurt you? Got anything like that?
Yeah, I had one, and I think I've talked about it before on this podcast, but I had a world globalization class. And that was the first time I heard about like microaggressions. And she had asked the class, do we think America will ever get to the point of no racism? And I had answered that I believe we're on the right track because I think the only racists that exist these days are individual racists. And coming from Jim Crow and everything, we're making good progress, and I believe we're on its way out. And then she sat there and lectured me the entire time about how I wouldn't know because I have white privilege. And then she pointed out the two black students in the class and was like, how do you think they feel about America, Tanner? That was the worst experience I ever had with a class.
That pretty much sums it up.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have the time to go through how the Crown bought off the institutions. They privatized their profit and socialized the loss. The loss, of course, was racism, the exploitation of people all over the world through colonialism. They just made the university and the then downstream institutions, the high schools, the junior high schools, and the elementary schools, they made this not about their crimes, but that it was all white people. They socialized their crime.
Hmm.
And we buy into this. And then, Julia Coleman, stand up for this. I know you're going to hear this, and you're going to fight back, and that's cool. But you know what? You're just pandering. You're not fighting an ideology. You're going along with it for your own personal ambition. You want to get elected. I don't want you to get elected. I don't want you to not get elected. I want you to tell the truth. And the truth is, we have a tremendous problem with our educational system here in Minnesota. Outcomes suck. We only have like less than 1% of people of color teaching in our Minnesota school systems. What's with that? We're supposed to be so anti-racist, but if you look at the data of who's doing the teaching, it's a very homogeneous group. That's not right. The student body is not homogeneous, it's heterogeneous. And the educational curriculum does not reflect where the people want to head. This is the Julia Coleman who said every member of the Minnesota Republican Senate caucus supports clean energy. That's not where we're at as the Republican Party. That's not where we're at. Education. Look at what President Trump is doing to fight back against this leftist ideology at the railhead, the university level. Where is the concomitant pushback from our Republican leadership here in Minnesota? Well, it's nowhere to be found. Hence the stridency of the rhetoric. If the elected officials like Marion Rarick would please stand up and start to work on these issues, because these issues are not solved overnight, but stand up with the courage to start to question with respect, with eloquence, start to look at these issues, to start to change the conversation in Minnesota so that the public can take a look and say, whoa, wait a second. These outcomes, these educational outcomes suck. And then what do? You ask for more money to make the size and scope of government even bigger. It's all wrong. I'm sorry. You're wrong, in my opinion. And I'm going to ride on our elected representatives until we get the outcomes that we want. So you can go ahead and condemn, you elected representatives, condemn the criticism, condemn it. And you know what? We don't care if you condemn it. I'm not condemning you personally. I am saying the conversation needs to do what? Get real. Get real. Stop spinning. Stop selling. And let's start solving the problems that have created a $37 trillion national debt, an open border with tens of millions of illegal criminal immigrants, and an endless war which has the world on the brink of nuclear destruction. The only way these issues get solved is if we get honest about it and really work on it. So you want to come on here, Julia? I'll be respectful. You can school me up. I'd like to hear it from your side. Any of you are welcome. I asked Michael Broadcorp to debate me because, he said I'm a liar. I said, prove it to the public. Now he doesn't want to do that. Why? Because he knows he cannot. What he's doing is spinning constantly. Brian Strouser is spinning constantly. Dustin Gragey is spinning constantly. Julia Coleman, Jim Nash. You guys are selling constantly. You're not trying to solve problems. You're using problems to pursue your own political ambitions. And even worse, from time to time, all the time, you wrap those political ambitions in the cloth of faith exposing us all as American citizens to the danger of violating the commandment, thou shalt not use the Lord's name in vain. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining tonight. God willing, we'll be back on Thursday. I hope you're well. Target.com, Free People Radio store. Please, your support is appreciated. Go to the website, Caucus Counterattack. Let's get organized. Follow me on X at Prof. Penn Podcast. If you're finishing this podcast and you're watching on Royce's X, please repost the link to the podcast. Please, everyone, grab the clips, repost the link, follow each other. Let's make a digital army that touches hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans and millions of people throughout this country so we can bring about the change that you and I know is so desperately needed. Tanner, thanks very much.
Of course. Have a good night, everybody.